right. I think that we done got the thumbs up. I think we done got the thumbs up from the young lady in the back. CCX Create, where we are here each and every Wednesday to bring you news that you can use. And there's always enough news to be able to share and use. I think I got bars today, bro. Hey, real quick, man. I just want to ensure that we have. I might make sure. Okay, here we go. I just want to quickly kind of share this here real quick, so and therefore we can kind of. There we go. But anyway, man, how you doing, brother?
Pretty good, pretty good. And yourself?
Man, it's Wednesday. It's one of those better days of the week. We kind of get past that Monday, Tuesday. Looking forward to that upcoming weekend. It's a nice day outside. You cannot complain. But man, as always, there's a lot of things that's kind of happening in the community. I have been had the opportunity to kind of have some different conversations, attend some Zoom meetings and things of that nature pertaining to Minnesota in general, right? And of course, it's election year, and there's a lot of things that's kind of flying around. But one of the things that I heard, the question I guess it's being asked is Minnesota under siege? And I get it. People tend to use various different verbiage that might be a little bit of inflammatory and things of that nature, but it seemed to be a pretty significant concern, by the vast majority of individuals that I have had the opportunity of kind of speaking with here over the last week. But before we kind of get into that, because there's a lot to that, and as you are running for Hennepin County Sheriff, we're definitely going to kind of get some feedback on some of the things that are happening, in Minnesota in general, and also, here in Hennepin County, if you will. But before we kind of get into that, man, I can't go no further without talking about my wonderful, big, beautiful Timberwolves. 44-28 in that fifth seed. They have 10 games left, in the regular season. They've been missing Ant-Man, for like the last 6-7 games or so. And they've been holding their own. They've been doing pretty good. So I have to kind of give my hats off to those individuals that's kind of coming off the bench and putting in that work. And there's some new young guys out there that are just, bringing them new fresh legs, bringing that energy, being able to spread the floor and hit those threes, when necessary. I believe they're like 6-4 over the last 10 games. I'm hoping that they can go at least 6-4 over these, last 10 games, but these upcoming 10 games that they have left, and see what happens. Of course, then we have our lovely Minnesota Vikings. Man, they seem to be kind of focusing on those at that quarterback position right now, as they have signed Kyle Murray, and they've also re-signed Carson Wentz. But both of these individuals, they've only signed for a 1-year contract. Now, I'm not 100% certain, why that is. It sounds as if they're still kind of hoping that the young guy that couldn't seem to stay healthy last year, will be able to sit one more year up under the tutelage of some veteran players and maybe be able to kind of gain some knowledge and some experience and kind of, get healthy and perhaps lead, Minnesota to the promised land in the future. I don't know. I don't really know exactly what Minnesota Vikings are thinking, but
No one knows what the Minnesota Vikings are thinking.
You saying the Minnesota Vikings don't know what the Minnesota Vikings
That's
are thinking.
right.
Huh?
They're a little suspect about being suspect.
Well, I'm a diehard, Minnesota Timberwolves fan, Minnesota Vikings fan, but I'm extremely realistic, especially when it kind of comes to our Vikings. I'm hoping that with the separation of folks retiring, maybe trading some other folks, bringing in some new folks, it's always kind of kind of up in the air. It's kind of like a gamble.
Yeah, we got Brother Jackson on here commenting as well about those Vikings. They're definitely a blood pressure tester, right?
Right.
Jack say worried about them Steelers. Every year we did, bro. It's the last time I checked, AFC division champion. But anyway, yeah, I hear you, Jackson. I hear you. But yeah, I think the Vikings, like I say, I would love to see them actually put together a winning season that included a postseason.
Right.
It's well due time that they get a championship of some kind under their belts, and it's not because they don't have good players. The problem of it is that the coaching for whatever reason, it's great at the start and then sucks at the end, right? My philosophy is if you're going to step on the gas, step on the gas. You got great receivers, sling the ball downfield, make somebody stop them, right? And then the good pass will open up the run. It'll definitely open up the run. So if you do that part, the Vikings have consistently shown that they can score points when they put their head to it. You know what I mean? But it's that conservativeness that they play. We're going to play, a couple passes here, and if it doesn't work, we're run and throw the ball, run and throw the ball. Each week is going to change up. One week you're going to have success in running the ball. The next week you're going to have success in passing the ball. But you got to keep teams guessing. You can't come in there one-dimensional thinking that, we're going to score 15, 20 points and sit on the lead. And then in the fourth quarter, you're fighting to stay in the game. That's just impossible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, and not only do I hope that we kind of win our division this coming season and we make it in the postseason, but I want to go into that postseason strong, not just kind of backdooring it, if you will, where we have to hope somebody else lose and all this other type of stuff. I believe that we have the talent. Yeah. I'm very interested to see who they're going to bring in since they fired that was he the GM?
Yeah.
I want to see who's going to replace him.
And I don't understand, firing the GM because he's nowhere near the field. But, I mean, my thing of it is, even with the coaches, I think at some point, the coach has some responsibility, but 80% of that responsibility is on the player, man. I mean, you getting paid a chunk of money to go out there and to perform at a high level. And when you go out there and you stink up the joint, it's just, that's time to have a conversation and renegotiate your salary. I mean, that's what I would do. But unfortunately, throughout the NFL, they fire the coaches or try to get rid of the administration. But remember, I'm putting in people in place that you, as an owner, allow me to based on your wallet. Right. And the coach is doing the best he can based with the talent that we give him to work with. He can only say, go this way, go that way, do this. It's up to the player to actually follow through and perform what he's been told to do.
Right. So as we kind of talk a little bit about those Steelers, right? Hey, this is going to be the first year with your new head coach, right?
It is.
Okay. It is. And so how I'm always kind of curious on how they came about this switch. I'm going to give you Mike Tomlin if you give me. What was that about?
Well, I mean, Tomlin has taken it on the chin quite a bit for the last 2 years, even though he's always finished the season strong. But the problem with that is that he started hearing the cry from the fans screaming, it's time to do something different. And all he cares about is filling those seats and making his money. I mean, that's the bottom line. But the Rooney family has been a consistent family. I mean, they generally, when they hire a guy, they stick with him. So, I mean, in this particular case, they figure they might stick with this guy. He's not going to cost them a bunch of money. He's more on the way out than he is up, right? He does have a decent history of winning in the league. And so, they're just looking to get a couple more years out of him. Rooney's up for retirement here pretty soon anyway, turn it over to his family. So, it's just making some internal moves. And it was time, for him to go somewhere else. He needed some fresh start, new blood, and he found a good home.
I really admire, your soft, feedback when it comes to the Steelers. But boy, when you talk about them Vikings, he says stuff with air in his chest, baby.
Well, I mean, you got to understand the best thing about our organization right now is that we're in a rebuilding state, and so everything is kind of up for grabs. But one thing I do love about Pittsburgh is that we don't allow players to leverage us, right? We don't. I don't care how good you are. If you don't do your job, you're not getting paid. And if you come in there and think you're going to hold out, you'll be on somebody else's team next year. So we are consistently about winning games, but I know that we talk a lot about winning game per game. We don't talk about, oh, we're going to go down here and smash all these guys. We look at it and go, no, we need to worry about what's happening this week and how we can win this game this weekend. And before we know it, we're strung along some wins, and we're fighting in the division championship and trying to get to the Super Bowl. And that's kind of how it is every year.
Right. Well, isn't pretty much every team, if you will, in some form of rebuilding or building stage every year? I mean, we hear that term thrown around a lot, but
well, I mean, because what it is when you talk about salary caps. And when you look at some of these combines and some of these players and their ability to play the game, and, you have to start thinking about it. Could you build a super team? You could. You really could build a super team, but you'd have to actually get the money together. And just because you got a super team on paper doesn't necessarily mean they're going to gel together. We've seen that happen where they put these super teams together, and then certain things happen. In fact, I mean, in Pittsburgh this past year, we had a really good roster, but we had some off-the-field things happen. We had players get suspended. We had some things happening in the locker room. I mean, Aaron got hurt. You know what I mean? So there were some adjustments that we had to make. Washington, who was an astounding, tight end and huge, but he got injured at a critical time in the season, and we were forced to play without him. And so we ended up with a lot of injuries. We kind of limped our way into the playoffs. And so it was like, oh, man, do we really have enough players to really make it forward? And I think at some point, we have to start deciding as an organization in NFL, like, are we going to extend the trading deadline? Because at the end of the year, everybody's kind of like, man, I got 3 people on the sideline. That's it. I done went through everybody in the, little bag up situation. And you can only bring so many players up from the practice squad, and because there's only so many players there,
right,
you know what I mean? And each at a different position. So it's not like you can bring a tackle up and say, yeah, you're quarterback this week. You know what I mean? And I mean, we went through it. We almost didn't have any receivers going into the playoffs. And a quarterback who was playing with a broke hand and hurt foot and little back, and, man, we had a little bit of everything.
Okay. All right. Well, we will see what happens this year. Huh?
But, I mean, you can see what happens when the franchise is not successful in what they're trying to achieve. The Vikings just spent, not the Vikings, but the Bears just spent a buttload of money revamping their field. And now there's talk that they're go ahead and possibly move into Indiana. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge thing because, I mean, the fan base is in Chicago. Right, and I know a lot of times they feel like, the fan base is wherever we can, people. Not everybody's going to drive to Indiana to see the Chicago Bears.
Absolutely.
Right, and I think it's going to change the dynamics of how they play because it was strategically placed, that field with the wind tunnel and all that good stuff, and you spend all that money, and you feel like, well, you're not making enough money in the seats. And I don't know how, because the Bears had a real good season this last year. They should have at least given them one more chance to do that. But it was kind of equivalent to what the Vikings did when they had AP, right? They had AP, and they used him to get the new stadium. And as soon as they knew they had it, it was like, he's out of here, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, man, we're going to see what happens this year.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward, to it as always. But before we kind of get into this exciting conversation.
Yes.
Pertaining to, is Minnesota under siege? We have to make sure that we hit them with them groundkeeping rules and that famous backpack.
Yes, yes. We just simply ask that you respect everyone's questions or comments. And remember that if we can't get back to you with an answer today, we'll do it on the very next show. With that being said, we start, middle, and end the show with a backpack.
That backpack, baby.
That backpack consists of making sure you have your driver's license and insurance before you get in that vehicle. Remember to place them above the visor. That way, if stopped by law enforcement, won't be mistaken for a weapon. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands so they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel, and then always make it on home to your loved ones. Same thing when walking down the street. Make sure you got your driver's license or ID where it's easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel, and as always make it on home to your loved ones.
Absolutely. Well, brother, when we talk about Minnesota, and we talk about Hennepin County, there's been a lot going on this year, right? And so, like I said before, I was just in various different meetings, several different conversations pertaining to Minnesota in general. And there's a lack of, I guess, trust, within our governor, our attorney general. People are asking, where is our current sheriff? Why isn't Mary Minority kind of charging folks? Why is it, fraud running so rampant? Things of that nature. So I just want to kind of throw some stuff out here real quick. And I know it's going to be kind of a lot, and then we'll just kind of go and break it down.
Okay.
One, like we said, the impact of ICE, fraud, the lack of numbers of the Minneapolis Police Department and also, other cities. The lack of numbers, of the Hennepin County, deputies. People are asking, where is, Sheriff Whitten and kind of what is she doing and things of that nature. We have the people have seen the interviews pertaining to Governor Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison, and they're thinking, feeling, and believing that there's just a lot of disrespect and a lack of professionalism, things of that nature. And then there was, what else was there? Oh, we had all the cars, kind of being broken into. A lot of cars, starting to spike that's being stolen. We recently had the 4 teens that was recently shot on Lake Street, in front of Popeyes. And so, and there's other different situations as well that has been kind of occurring. When we kind of talk about the situation where the 4 teens were shot, there is individuals that want to kind of connect, with the city, want to connect with the police department to kind of put out some more, boots on the ground or patrol these areas and things of that nature. But again, we have a ton of nonprofit entities, that's supposed to be boots on the ground or some type of community outreach or youth crime prevention, de-escalation, things of that nature. But we still seem to have the same or even worse outcomes. Nothing seems to be kind of getting better, right? I had even had a conversation with a young lady about this 2026 United Black legislative agenda. And there's just a bunch of different things that was kind of listed, in this book. And there's a bunch of individuals that was, I guess part of this. But I just want to read some of these names here. The NAACP Minneapolis, the NAACP Minneapolis Dakotas, the Urban League of the Twin Cities, Church of God in Christ, Minnesota State Baptist Convention, the Pentecostal Assembly of the World, these and then there's just a whole bunch of others that was kind of in the back of this book that was, kind of voluntary partners that had some type of feedback or information, kind of pertaining to this. And I just want to read off some of these names because there's a whole list of them. The Minnesota Organizing for Change, Victory of the People, Agape, A Mother's Love, Be Better Foundation, Black Political Action, God Squad, Keep in Focus, Turning Point, The Watch, United Not Divided, We push for peace, victory of the people, and there's just a host of others, that had some type of input, pertaining to what was in this manual. I think the manual was put together pretty good. I know that some of the information seemed to be a little outdated, because I saw a lot of it was coming from like 22, 23, and I know that you kind of have to go back a little bit because you don't necessarily have, the current information because you have to do those studies and those numbers and things of that nature. But you have all of these different entities and organizations that's kind of pumping their fist and beating their chest, if you will, and we're saying kind of enough is enough, and we can't take anymore, and we having these different protests and these different marches for peace and things of that nature. You have individuals jumping on Facebook and other different forms of social media, providing their views and opinions, and everybody's voice is important, right? Because we've said it before that the power comes from who?
The people.
It comes from the people, and you have to get involved. You have to have input and impact on the type of outcome that you wish to see. When you don't vote, a no vote is a what?
It's a vote.
It's a vote. When you are not voting and you are not getting involved, you're basically saying that you really don't care what the outcome is. But yet when it's not what you want it to be, then we all end up having some type of different things that we need to kind of talk about or we need to say, right? So I want to encourage all of these entities and all of these individuals that are sitting in these various different spots, to do the right thing. I think that we're placing, I said this before, that we're placing too many our political, personal, and financial gain, in front of doing what's right. We seem to be failing to work together because a lot of these entities are providing the same or similar type of service, but yet we are not working together. We see millions and millions of dollars every fiscal year being provided to these nonprofit entities, but yet we still have the same issues and concerns, when it kind of comes to Minnesota as a whole, but primarily Hennepin County.
Well, I think it's primarily because, people are finding ways to live with the situation instead of fixing it, right? They're finding ways to patch it, if you would, for lack of a better term. And a lot of times what these groups are talking about is drawing attention to what we already know, that there's something wrong.
Right.
But what we need to spend more time doing is rallying around common ways to fix the problem and then initiating follow-through plans to actually put those fixes into action. So we've been shaking the fist for a while. We know that we have issues in the county and throughout the state. But the problem of it is we're not rallying enough attention on what is the actual plan to fix and what is the fix by date, right? So when we know that, then we can actually begin to build. And I don't even want people to think in terms of large projects. Let's fix small projects and then build on those. Like, for an example, if you're on one street that has a bunch of broken windows, let's fix the windows, right? Because then we know those windows on that street are good to go. And then let's go to the next block and fix those windows, right? And let's say there's 15 blocks with broken windows and we want to have those blocks fixed by X amount of day. Here's what it's going to cost us to fix those windows, right? So we know the cost, we know the time frame, and then we know when we should actually be done, right? And then come back with that same statistical data and go, you know what? When we started in August, there were 15 blocks of broken windows. By the time we got to September, we had all the blocks fixed and there were no more broken windows. So people can actually see positive outcomes, right, of the work that they invested. So, and what we have is a problem of people doing these things in organizations, but there's no measurable outcomes, right? We can't see the data.
Right. So when we kind of talk about the broken window theory, right? The example that you were just kind of given, as we see the county attorney, Mary Mariotti, had just recently decided to not, charge or prosecute an anti-ICE individual who was running around the city of Minneapolis, in Hennepin County, spray painting, numerous businesses, but yet this individual caused, a lot of damage, based off of what he did. But she chose not to charge him, and this is what individuals become so frustrated about is when, we stated before, is when individuals derelict of duty, then we have these broken windows and they're not being fixed.
Right.
We have the sheriff who was just in front of the committee, and she was asking for, was it $10 million?
Well, she was informing them that she was in the hole this year, starting off $10 million, because she said they gave her authorization to hire X amount of employees, but didn't give her the money to go along with it. And as a result of that, it kind of put her in the hole, $10 million in her budget to start off the year.
So again, like you just said, if you know that these windows are broken, because if you're getting given approval for X number of staff, but you don't have the budget, for that staff, meaning that's where the window starts to be broken. And then if you're not asking for that money up front, and then you come on the back end, and then you start saying, hey, I need this money in order for us to kind of pay the staff, the community.
Well, I think, the big thing is it comes off. I understand the strategy. The strategy was, I'm going to shame the commission for not giving me this money and go, look at what I'm trying to do, but these bad guys won't put me in the position to do so. But the problem with that is that you need to be having these conversations with the commissioners, not just at the meetings and things of that nature. These need to be some conversations that are being had, so we're not walking into these meetings playing the blame game, right? Because the overall goal is that we want to keep the people of Hennepin County safe, and I think we all can agree on that. We just need to figure out on what's the best possible way that we can do it and all be happy, right? And so that's what's important, is that we come again out of this with a fix, right? It should have been, you know what, we're getting a lot of pressure from the state because we don't have enough staff. Here's what that's going to cost me. But if I'm going to hire these people, I need to know ahead of time that I'm authorized not just for the staff and training, but also for the hiring of the new folks, right? And being able to, push this out for at least a 3 to 4 year window, because that's what you need to have in place so that, moving forward, you're going to be good to go. And apparently that didn't happen because they still voted to not give her the funding. And so, like I say, it's always good when you go into a meeting kind of having the feel that you have X amount of people that's on your side.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, a lot of these things are always heightened, right? Especially when it's that election year.
Yeah.
Right. And you are, seeking election for Hennepin County Sheriff, 2027.
26.
26. You start in 27.
Yes.
He said, hey, don't be trying to take no year away from me.
We're trying to get this over and done with this year. We want to know.
Okay. But so with that being said, you have some representative, state representative that had, put some bill or trying to get some bill passed in regards to law enforcement, being able to kind of come into your home, and check your weapons, and making sure that you have nothing over, 10-round magazines and no high-capacity magazines, and they don't necessarily have to have a warrant. And, and if you have anything over, 10-round magazine, then you have to get some type of special permission slip, if you will, from your local law enforcement and things of that nature. This is just one of the issues and concerns, if you will, of how we seem to be broken and kind of like
Yeah.
under siege.
So, I mean, we're coming up with these new gun laws and regulations, and we would do pretty good if we just enforced the ones we currently have. But the problem of it is that it's a lot of rhetoric, and we as a state don't have the manpower for the amount of citizens to go house to house trying to verify whether or not folks have high capacity magazines or not. And then not only that, most of the high capacity magazines are being found on the street, not necessarily in homes, and there's no way to even manage the flow of that.
Right.
So it's just rhetoric yet again because it's an election year. But I will tell you this. If citizens don't pay attention, it will become a law because they'll slide it through on the back of some other bill, and no one paid attention to it and protested it.
Right.
So,
Well, I think there's a lot, that would have to occur, before, something like that there would be passed. But either way,
yeah.
again, if this is something, that you're, don't want to occur, if you're tired of your taxes being raised or whatever it is that you're not the crime rate going up. I mean, I think that we all will agree that we anti-crime,
Yes.
right? But again, how are we going to fix that, right?
Yes.
And we have to have a plan. And it just seems as if there's no real plan in Minnesota.
There doesn't seem to be. I mean, and here's the thing: Minnesotans don't necessarily want further government reach. What they want is a self-sustained program in which they can see a positive outcome and a plan to know that tomorrow's going to be better, right? And that's what we should be pushing for. Our representatives should be in our communities talking with the people who are boots on the ground, checking to see what successes they're having and how they can strengthen that. And that's just not happening. They're being told through third-party services or surveys, and they don't even actually be able to see what's really happening. They're not able to see that, and they're making these decisions that are affecting people's lives in real time. So, yeah, we need to start having some planning sessions. We have had the protests, which are great, and the protests, as you're going to see, comes from people screaming and yelling for rights and what regulations that they feel to be get changed. But the bottom line of it is now we have the attention, which is what the protest is all about. Let's get to the plan, because now you got the attention. Let me see what you plan to do better or do different.
Absolutely. Well, another one of the topics that kind of came up, over this last week is especially when they kind of talking about the 14s that were shot over on Lake Street, is you hear a lot of individuals say, we have to meet them where they're at. We have to meet them where they're at. We have to meet them where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are starting to acknowledge that, meeting them where they're at pretty much is in the street. It's not working,
Right.
And so everybody is always saying, but it starts where? In the home.
Yes.
So if we're not necessarily being able to meet, these individuals in their homes, perhaps maybe in their schools, and unfortunately, if we have to then put some type of program or something together and meet them while they're incarcerated, so then therefore we can kind of deter them before they get out, so then therefore they don't go back out into the community, and then we have to then meet them, on the street. Because once they're on the street, it's just like they're not really trying to hear what you have to say.
So there's a few things happening with the youth today. I mean, one is that there's a major disconnect between the age eras, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're still trying techniques that didn't work for us on these younger children or younger youth, and they're facing a whole host of different problems. The first thing we have to admit is that we do have a juvenile crime or youth crime issue. We have a major issue. The second part out of it is we need to figure out how can we fix them, and it's not about just being afraid to take people into custody. We need to be able to place them in facilities where they can get the proper help, both mentally and criminally as well. And that just hasn't happened yet. These courts are overwhelmed. They're already not making the proper decisions, but they're not even giving the proper help once they do have these folks in front of them. So as a result of it, they're reoffending. So you have a three-pronger there. You got folks that are dealing with chemical dependency issues at a young age, either drugs or alcohol. You got some that actually have mental health issues, right? And some that have trauma. And we're not addressing any one of those. And most importantly, we're putting in policies and procedures that aren't effective because we're not where the youth are in their mental capacity. You need to start incorporating some of these youth into the building programming process so that we know that we're addressing today's issues, not last year's issues, right? And that's what's happening is we're still shaking the fist going, well, the courts aren't doing this, the courts aren't doing that. And listen, I've talked to multiple parents who tell me, man, I beg the courts to take my child into custody. I begged the courts to do anything. They didn't do nothing until finally something tragic happened and they wanted to blame me, and I can't physically discipline them without the fear of going to jail. I can't put him out. I talked to a mom who told me that she had a restraining order against her 16-year-old son and was told by law enforcement that she had to let him back into the house, even though he had physically assaulted her several times and there was a record of that assault. So these are the type of things that these parents are facing and we have to take into consideration. Our law enforcement officers are out here doing their job, but when they catch people and they're not being prosecuted properly or placed properly in proper facilities, then it's a reoccurring thing that's happening again and again and again, and it's just very dangerous out there right now.
Absolutely. Well, you had said it best before is that, you have to be able to replace equal or greater what they're missing, right? And there's a lot of kind of ugly statistics out there when it kind of comes to our African American families, whether it's about the money, that the household's making, the education level in that household, if they're owning that household and they're renting, excuse me. So the percentage of those young African American children who are living in a single family home, and them not that mother, aunt, or father who's parenting this kid is not receiving the necessary financial support or physical support from that other half. All of these and then some, are impacting, these young lives, right?
Yeah.
So how, are we supposed to be able to replace, a missing parent, whether it's a mother or father?
Well, the first thing we got to do is we have to find a way to shift the mindset of societal norms, right? Societal norms right now makes the behavior that these young folks do normal for their society, right? We have to go back to having some kind of actual structure. There's no balance, right? You wouldn't build a house with having a foundation and putting walls up so you know when the house, where each end of it ended, right? We're out here flying blindly with no structure at all. And we've gotten away from it more and more each year because we've leaned toward, I don't want to look like the bad guy. I don't want to seem like we're doing too harsh. But there has to be some kind of boundaries in place. The youth want and need structure, right? If we don't pass on structure and guidance, then they have no idea what their expectation is or what they should be doing moving forward. And so that's what's happening here, right? Kids aren't going to school properly, so we have less kids graduating. We're not talking about the importance of education, so we have less kids even worried about going to college. A lot of kids can't even read, right? In this day and age, when we have the best technology, you still have a lot of kids who can't even read the basic concept. So there's a lot of lack of foundation and structure in our society. And each day we're trying to figure out ways to tear away from that structure that's in place, that's already in place, that's keeping us together. And we're getting closer and closer to having almost no structure at all.
Well, when you're talking about reading, and I want to kind of throw some stuff out here because I know that we're kind of rounding the end of another fabulous show, but there's just never enough time to really truly address, the things that seem to be holding Minnesota, under siege. But when we're talking about reading, and again, this is from 2022, and this is kind of coming out of that 2026 United Black Legislative Agenda. So 2022, for the black students, they were those reading at their grade level is at 28.9%. When we're talking about math, it was 18.7%. And then when we're talking about graduation, it was only at 70.4%. These numbers are alarming.
They are, and the sad part of it is that when you look at the society that we live in today, you ask yourself, how is that possible when we have equal housing, equal education, equal structure supposedly throughout our country, and that's not the case.
Right.
Right. It's tragic because you don't want to necessarily tie it to a color or culture, but we realistically live in a society where that does take a play. We're not saying Beeks is a man. We said he's a black man or African American man, right? So we're still a country that breaks stuff down by color and culture schemes instead of just judging people, as King said, based on the character, right, of one's ability. And so we have to get to the point where we're seeing things equally together, wrong, equally together, right. You see what I'm saying? We're just not quite there, but we have to find that happy medium because we're suffering because of it, right? The distraction that we're having based on colors and heritage is causing us conflict. We shouldn't even been there when it came to immigration because it wasn't necessarily about whether or not you were not from the country. What it was about was whether or not you was legally here as a citizen, right? And we should have all rallied around whether or not you had gotten here legally and that you were being processed legally and properly. You see what I'm saying? And so, there's some things we could do when it comes to immigration reform. Probably the biggest thing being, why is it taking several years to decide whether someone should be here or not? And I think that's where the problem is. If I can't be here, tell me tomorrow. So I'm back home tomorrow, no harm, no foul. Right. But when you wait 10 to 15 years after I've established a business, got my kids raised here, and we're trying to have a good life, and you go, oh man, I know you put in 20 years, but today we all agree that you can't stay. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And that is the problem that we have. And so we need to get back to structure. Right.
Well, when you're talking about structure, right? Let me just say this here before I kind of go there. Because there's another high-profile case when we're talking about illegal immigrants or those that are not supposed to be here because they didn't come here properly or whatever the case may be. There was an 18-year-old girl, I believe, in Florida. Don't quote me on the state. That was just recently killed by a male, and they determined that he was not here legally, right? But when we get to talking about structure, right, we have to ensure that we are all working together, right? And that's going to be community, law enforcement, our government, mayor, city council, et cetera, et cetera. We have to be able to work together, and it's okay to agree to disagree.
Right.
Because we shouldn't agree on everything all the time. But we should not be having conversations or meetings that don't include, the community and vice versa.
Yeah.
So as you are, running for, Hennepin County Sheriff, and we've made it abundantly clear that we definitely plan on ensuring that we involve the community within the process of bringing a better tomorrow for the county, right? But we still have all of this chaos. We still have all of this unstableness and people being concerned and people just simply asking, is Minnesota under siege? Why is the Hennepin County the way that it is? Right? And there's so many different people that are saying different things and they have different opinions and outlooks. And everybody is not necessarily completely wrong. They may not necessarily be 100% right, but everybody has some validity in what it is that they're saying. So I say all that to say this here, or to ask this here. Obviously, it appears at this point in time that we're going to get a new governor. It appears that we're, looking at getting a new attorney general. Mary Mayority, she's not running again. People feel that Ilhan Omar is going to be, replaced. And then we have, if you will, the election of Hennepin County Sheriff, right? What is it that you will give to the people or have to say to the people right now that's having all of these concerns about Minneapolis, or Minnesota, and also just Minneapolis, with all of the fraud, with all of the car theft, with all of the car break-ins, with our teens being shot, and investigations not being solved, and people are still out here running free. They have these machines that will be able to tell you that you're going 5 miles per hour over, you know what I'm saying? But then they can't never really look at the various different cameras that we're supposed to have, to be able to kind of track down certain crime and things of that nature. What is it and how is it that you're going to be able to bring this stability, if you will, back to Hennepin County, so then therefore we can have that trust and that partner, that working relationship, not just within the law enforcement and so on and so forth, but within the community as a whole?
I mean, the key is involving the people that we serve. We're going to get involved with them. We're going to have some real conversations. And remember that Minneapolis is the largest city in Hennepin County, but it's not all of Hennepin County.
Right.
And so we're going to involve all of Hennepin County to keep the county safe. We're going to talk to people who live in the suburban communities, those who live in the inner city communities, and find what they feel would best fit them to keep them safe. And we're going to roll out a robust plan to make that happen. Now, I've already got some things in place of how we're going to go about that. We've got some budgets worked out and some things we need to run past the commissioning staff. But the key is we're going to be talking to people about how we can best keep everyone safe. And I think it doesn't matter where you live in the county. We all agree that we want to be safe in Hennepin County. All of us agree on that. We want to be able to spend time with our families. We want to be able to enjoy ourselves. We want to have fun times. But we want to be safe in Hennepin County. And I think the way to do that is, one, we need more professional cops that are going to do the job. We need to have a robust police department so we're not killing ourselves with overtime and people who are tired making bad decisions, things of that nature. We need to deal with officers' mental health issues, things like that. I mean, there are some things that we're going to do with getting the community involved that will help us identify and solve problems throughout the county, right? And by doing so, everyone will get a chance to see that crime is down. They don't have to be told with some manipulated stats. They will actually see and feel and know that their county is safe again.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, I know that we're rounding, the end of another fabulous show. But I do want to say a couple of things here is people, it is, if now is not the time, I don't know when is. You have to make sure that you're kind of getting involved, right? You just have to. I mean, I can kind of go on and on for the reasons why, but for whatever your reason is, you have to kind of get involved. And remember, you need to, make sure that you're getting out voting.
Yeah, and it's important to know. I mean, listen, I don't have to tell you what you're living in. You see what you're going through day to day. You see the garbage on the streets, the filth in there. You see people that are out there with needs that aren't getting met. I mean, we have to actually get out here and make a difference, one person, one situation, one community at a time, until we got a lot of communities strung together where people can feel safe again. This is real stuff here. We're not talking stats. We're not talking about showing up at programs that are already pre-safed. We're talking about actually coming to ground zero, getting out of our cars and communicating with the people in the community and figuring out a way that we can keep everybody safe together. And more importantly, we're not going to just keep screaming about, oh, this is what's wrong. We're going to leave each community with some type of plan that shows that we can do this to make things better. And then we're going to have a start by date and an end by date so that we will know, yep, we got that done.
Right.
Let's finish what we start with real stats.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really quick before we get out of here, because we had the big queen come in today. How you doing over there today? All right. Really quick before we get out of here, I just want to go over something really quick when it kind of comes to public safety, as we see that there's a lot of a lack of a lot of officers out there, throughout the county, throughout the state as a whole. So a lot of entities are relying on a lot of security companies, right? Please, please, please make sure that you are asking for these individuals a copy of their license, a copy of their insurance. They should not be shy or scared to kind of share with you some of their training, things of that nature. Understand that just because you hire a contract security company to provide whatever services based on your request or your ask does not mean that you are, free from, from being part of a lawsuit as well, if or when that security company perhaps takes some type of action and something occurs and all of these other I's is not dotted and T's are not crossed, right? Don't be shy. Don't be scared or afraid to perhaps, build your own in-house team. A lot of people feel or believe that you're saving money because you're hiring this contract security company and they have to deal with, payroll and disability and whatever else benefits that they may or may not offer. But yet you don't really get to vet, who shows up at your place of establishment. And you need to make sure that whoever is showing up at your place of establishment is a representative of what it is that you offer at your place of business. So again, just make sure that you understand what your ask is and what this entity is able to provide for you, because again, there's a lot of entities that are just out here taking contracts because of the finances, because of the money. And a lot of individuals are hurrying up because something happened and they don't necessarily vet the security company appropriately. And now all of a sudden they're locked into this year contract, and it costs them a lot of money if they want to get out early because now they're unhappy. And a lot of security companies is just, being cycled through. So take your time, do your homework, vet the security company, make sure that you have your I's dotted and T's crossed. And at the very least, don't be shy or afraid or scared to perhaps start your own in-house public safety entity.
Yes, and as we get out of here, let's start the conversation. Do we have a design flaw with the process of hiring cops in the state of Minnesota? Right? Do we have a design flaw? Because there are other states that are doing it without the 2-year degree. There are other states that are allowing you to get the degree once you get hired. But the problem is that we're very short manpower in terms of law enforcement in the state of Minnesota, and the hiring process is roughly between 2 and 4 years to even get hired. And when we're looking at the state of Minnesota, who's now in a state of crisis because we have crime that is through the roof and we're refusing to admit it, people are dying. Things are getting done that should be getting taken care of. Right? And that's a problem right now. We need to hire some people. I'll just say a quick thing. Hennepin County Sheriff, 270, 260 deputies for 1.5 million people. patrol deputies. We're not talking about corrections deputies. We're talking about folks actually on the street patrolling to keep you safe, right? Minneapolis, one of the largest cities in Hennepin County, 600 or less officers, right? Think about that. If something major league happened, we're not prepared to keep you safe. And we can't live like that. We just can't live like that. So I want to give you that to think about as we leave here today, because that's something that comes from you, the people, to make that change. Go get on the team, join the team, sign up, be a police officer, join the department, talk to your representatives about funding to increase the police, right? As they said, increasing the police will increase the peace. And then you, the community, wrap your arms around that and get involved and be a part of keeping us all safe in Hennepin County.
Absolutely. Well, again, we're down to the end of another fabulous show of Let's Talk About It, where we are here each and every Wednesday. Again, we want to say thank you to CCX Create as they allow us to be here. But again, they can't do it alone. So please, 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 even in these challenging financial times with gas prices going up and everything else, if you can dig in that wallet, that pocketbook, and pull out a quick $1 or $2 and push that donate button on CCX Create's webpage, I guarantee you that they will greatly appreciate it. With that being said, Brother Banks, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to you so you can go ahead and hit him with that that famous backpack.
That final backpack.
That famous backpack. And we can kind of get on up out of here and enjoy some of this weather we still got left.
With that being said, we start normally end every show with that backpack.
That backpack.
And that backpack consists of making sure that you have your driver's license and the insurance with you before you get in that vehicle. Remember to place them above the visor. That way, if stopped by law enforcement, it won't be mistaken for a weapon and be easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always, make it on home to your loved ones. Same theme when walking down the street. Make sure you got your driver's license or ID where it's easily accessible. Remember to stay calm. Keep your hands where they can be seen. Allow the officer to go through his spiel. And as always, make it on home to your loved ones. Another beautiful day today. Everyone enjoy themselves. If you see something, say something. Check on your neighbors. My name's Joe Banks.
And I'm Anthijuan Beeks.
And we just talked about it.
Peace.